It's dark out, I sit in bed, I feel asleep, dark in my eyes. Still awake this late at night, a day done and nothing to write. Some say it's difficult to find, and the words they just stay inside. How about you start at the beginning? You woke up, I go on, I listen. Is life like this? Pen to paper alone like this? Is this how they'll see me when I'm gone? Then should I dismiss my real thoughts to protect my kids? Or should I let them see my weaknesses? How will they remember me when I'm gone? Should I let them see my weaknesses? How will they remember me when So I record the same, the wild and mundane, 'cause I'm a whole person like they'll be too. I'll tell the truth when I was wrong, and what I sacrificed to be strong. I'll write every day, I'm in the way, even make it a habit that I don't lose. 'Cause I look back to, with a warmer heart, at the younger girl I once was. My journal's like a link book to my brain, so reach out to it, cross the gate. 'Cause everything I am is safe here in my mind. Someone told me that I couldn't be myself. I would be me even more through my doubts. You get a grip on my soul as you read on. It's harder to love me now that you can arrange all my flaws. Category, time, date, and cause. Get up out of way and pause. It's not worth it, there are so many more. I've been greedy and selfish and borderline reckless. I mostly broke promises up with myself when I told myself till I could feel no more breath. I'd be better than this, I'd be better than this. Only managed to disappoint myself. No one knows, so they can't force me to look for help. It's a cycle I've repeated and know so well, but it's secret. Can you keep it? It's dark out, I sit in bed, I feel asleep, dark in my eyes. Still awake this late at night, a day done and nothing to write. Some say it's difficult to find, and the words they just stay inside. How about you start at the beginning? You woke up, go on, I listen. It's dark out, I sit in bed, I feel asleep, dark in my eyes. Still awake this late at night, a day done and nothing to write. Some say it's difficult to find, and the words they just stay inside. How about you start at the beginning? You woke up, I go on, I listen. Is life like this? Pen to paper alone like this? Is this how they'll see me when I'm gone? Then should I dismiss my real thoughts to protect my kids? Or should I let them see my weaknesses? How will they remember me when I'm gone? Should I let them see my weaknesses? How will they remember me when So I record the same, the wild and mundane, journal's like a link book to my brain. So reach out to it, cross the gate. 'Cause everything I am is safe here in my mind. Someone told me that I couldn't be myself. I would be me even more through my doubts. Get a grip on my soul as you read on. It's harder to love me now that you can arrange all my flaws. Category, time, date, and cause. Get about halfway and pause. It's not worth it, there are so many more. I've been greedy and selfish and borderline reckless. I mostly broke promises up with myself when I told myself till I could feel no more breath. I'd be better than this, I'd be better than this. Only managed to disappoint myself. No one knows, so they can't force me to look for help. It's a cycle I've repeated and know so well, but it's secret. Can you keep it? It's dark out, I sit in bed. I feel asleep, dog in my eyes. Still awake this late at night. A daytime, nothing to write. Some say it's difficult to find, and the words they just stay inside. How about you start at the beginning? If you woke up, go on and listen.
Hey friends, thanks for tuning in again today in the second Watch Me Code. So I started broadcasting live coding through the Watch Me Code channel last week on Wednesday as well. And well, was I think kind of fun, made some good progress on the project that I was working on. Then I thought, well, to do it again today, a week later at the same time. So the idea of today is that I'm going to take you through what I'm currently building, which is an extension to one of the SharePoint Framework solutions that we've built at InSpark. And I'm going to use Azure Logic Apps for that. We're going to build a custom connector that registers basically an additional source that can be called by the web part to obtain some data. And the idea is that the person creating the logic app using this custom connector can determine himself or herself where to get that data from. So yeah, let's get to it, and briefly I will take you through the introduction or a little sketch of what we're trying to do today. So over here I have a whiteboard, and if you followed along last week, then you're probably familiar with what we're trying to do. So we have this web part. That web part is called My Starting Point, and this web part shows some details like the number of Outlook messages, and the number of calendar items, so meetings, for example. And that's all good and fun. It grabs the data from the graph, the Microsoft graph that is, and those connections are built in. So we've built this web part, including a couple of items from Outlook and a couple of items from the calendar. But we get requests to get information from other systems that is not part of the default sources. And because they are very specific for each client, we wanted to make this more extensible, so that we can plug in additional sources when we want to. So what we're trying to achieve is that we're going to create an API, and this is what we're continuing building today. So my starting point will obtain the additional sources from that API, and then it will call that API to get the data for a specific source. So the web part has a configuration piece where you can configure the sources that you want to show, and we want to get the sources dynamically from an API, and in runtime it will get the data, so that number that you see on the web part, how many messages you have or how many tasks you have open, that's the get data. So we store these sources in Azure table storage. So we have a table here with the sources, and that API will obtain that data from the table, which sources are available. And we want to make it easy to register additional sources, so we create a custom connector for our logic app. So when we have a logic app, that logic app is then triggered by a webhook trigger that we are creating, and that trigger, when you create that, you will need to provide a title so that we can display that in the configuration area, and it will send a callback that will be that's going to the API. That's basically the webhook registration. And that's then stored in that sources table. And then when the in runtime, when the web part is actually getting the data from that particular source, then the API will actually call that webhook to get the data. And the idea is that logic app will return a response in a specific format that the API can understand and can return that data. So previously, last week, we built a piece of the API. We created this table over here, and we tested it out with a flow using the regular HTTP webhook trigger. And we're going to pick up from there today, because we want to build a custom connector so that we can make it easier for people to use it. And then we're going to try to integrate it in the web part itself. So we have last time we have stubbed, so we had created the webhook registration, so that's created. We can get the sources from the table, but what's not been created yet is this part. That's been stubbed out currently, so it's always returning a static number. So that's also something that we want to take a look at. And obviously we want to also take a look at this piece. So what does it return? So let's get to it. Let's run the sample where we are currently and then just continue. So here we are in Visual Studio. I've loaded up the project that we've created previously. So let me run it. This will launch the Azure function. And then we can call it using Postman to get data from that function. That's getting data from that Azure table. And we're going to test out the webhook registration briefly, so we can ensure that that still works. And then we're going to create a custom connector for it. All right, so the function is launched. We have 4 operations currently. We can get the user data options, which are the sources, basically. We can get the value for one of the sources, and that's the part that's currently stubbed out, so it's always returning a static number. We can subscribe a new user data option, which is the webhook registration, and we can also unsubscribe it. So when we delete the logic app or flow, or we change something in the trigger, it will do a delete of that subscription. So first, I'm going to switch over to Postman to test out some of these calls. So I've set up a couple of calls during the previous session. Let's first try to get the user data option. So basically, it will return everything that is stored in that table. I'm going to run it on localhost. It will call my function, and here we go. So we have one with some GUID as a title and not a callback URL, and this is one the sample data I inserted directly into the table. This is not the actual webhook registration. So we'll check this out when we have registered one of the new sources. We can also get data. So here we say, give us the data for this particular ID. And like I said, it always returns a static number, always 0. We can subscribe. This is a webhook subscription. So what we give it a title and a callback URL, and that will be added to the table. So we execute this. It will now have created this source. So if I go back to the get user data option and run that again, I will get 2 results. Perfect. And if I unsubscribe it again, and for the unsubscription, the title is bleeding. And now it's unsubscribed, and going back to sources, it will be gone again. So this part works as expected. Now let's view it from a flow. So flow is very similar to logic apps, and we're going to try it out using the flow designer, but instead we can create a custom connector which is very similar for logic apps and do more or less the same thing over there. So it doesn't matter if we are testing it in flow right now or testing it in logic apps. This solution will work in both scenarios, and depending on the maturity of a client, we can decide to do it in flow or do it in logic apps. So let's go to my flows. Well, I've deleted the flow from the previous time. So let's create a new flow, and I'll start with a blank one. And we start off with the trigger, so the HTTP webhook. So this is one of the custom of it, or this is one of the out of the box triggers, but it does the same as we want using a custom connector. So to subscribe and to unsubscribe is delete. To subscribe is a post. So the URI, that's interesting because the function is running locally. So this is available on localhost, and flow is running in the cloud. So how can we ensure that that we can call our flow or our function locally, and that can be done through ngrok or ngrok or whatever it's called. I showed that previously, but let's take a look at it again. I'm going to set it up quickly. So in my downloads folder, I have here ngrok. Let's open a command window, and as I do not remember the exact syntax, I'll just go here, start it. Here we go, and then to start a tunnel we need to start on a different port, but it's ngrok http and then our port number, so ngrok http, and our port number is 7071. This will basically open up a tunnel to our local host on that port, and there it is. So it's available now, and I should be able to call it using this address. And let's see, I'll test this out quickly. So it's API, and what's it called? User data options. User data options. It's basically doing a regular get operation. It's taking its time though. Is that I'm trying to get user data options. Why is it not loading? User data options. That's kind of interesting. There's also a dashboard available. Let's see. Previously this worked as like a charm. Okay. There we go. So I explained that previously. If you click somewhere in your command window, it will actually freeze the execution. And I tend to do that a couple of times. So I need to click somewhere else, press enter, and then it works. So now I should have the results over this URL. So that looks good. So let me take this URL, paste it here, and then let's see. I want to post to the user data options to do a subscribe. And I was very careful not to click somewhere in the command window. So the body needs to have a title. My flow subscription. Then we need to have a callback URL. And therefore we can use the callback URL input parameter. For deletes, it's basically the same. URL is identical, and I believe that we just need to provide the title in the body, and no, the callback URL is not required. So this should, if I press save, now let's check this again. So if I get the current data options, we have just one. If I press save, it will, I need to at least have one. Let's create a response right away. We'll just do 200. Okay, I save it, and we should notice that the additional subscription or the additional source has been registered now with the callback URL. So this URL can be used to call this logic app. And if we change anything, it will actually do a delete and a create again. So now it's a different URL and the title has been changed. Perfect. Okay, so now we have this subscribed. Excellent. Now we'd like to call this URL through that API. When we want to get the data. So going back into our function, we have the get user data value, and currently it's just returning 0. Let's change this to actually get the callback URL, do an HTTP request to that callback URL, obtain the data, and then return that data. Right? Sounds good. So I need to have access to the table. I've done that before. I'm using a parameter binding for that. It makes it a lot easier to get to Azure tables. So this will just set up the connection to the table for me. And this particular piece with the percentages, this is actually going to replace the application setting value for this property in runtime. So in my local settings, I have this particular setting, and that resolves the user data options. So in runtime, this value is going to be used as the table name here. Perfect. So next up, we want to actually retrieve the user data option based on this ID, and that ID is the title. We've decided that it was going to be the title. So we've done this before. So in the unsubscribe, we're also looking up one instance based on ID. In this case, title. Let's see, so I want to retrieve this. We've chosen a static string for the partition key, and we're going to use the ID. There's the row key. And in my sample case, so this is not correct. It should read and obviously we're going to have issues with the spaces and the URL encoding and all that stuff. I'll figure it out later. So we retrieve that particular option. User data option table results. Obviously, it could be the case that this does not exist anymore, so we need to handle that scenario. We'll check for that later. I want to do the happy flow right now. So we have this user data option that has a callback. We're now gonna call that particular callback. So we're gonna use a HTTP client. Get async user data option dots. Let's cast this to a user data option entity because we know that's what it is. And here we have the callback URL. Results. So now we let's call it response. We get a response back. We can check if it has a success status code. Okay, object results, response dots, content dots, reads as. We know it should be a number for now. Let's do it the other way around. So if we do not have success, we return a new error results. Yeah, I'm always struggling with this. So what will I return? Empty results. Well, let's go with a I want to return the status code that I get. Maybe internal application. How to return a specific status code and new contents. Return status code. Okay, we can just throw an exception, perhaps. And we can use response dots. Reason phrase, for example. Okay, cool. Let's clean that up. All right, so this now will call the logic app, or the flow in this case, get that data, and then return that as the result. So let's see how that works. But currently we're not returning anything, so we have an empty result. So let's see how it's coping with that. To the breakpoints. Let's add here. All right. So what does this ID? Okay, so it's not escaped, which is good. So this should just work. All right, cool. Set callback URL. We do not get a successful code, and the reason is not found. It's kind of interesting. Not found. Ah, okay, we're doing a get, but logic apps, you need to do a post. But at least we can check out what this looks like. So now we can have a 500 internal server error. Perfect. And we need to change it up to not do a get, but do a post. Because that's just how these things work. How can we do an empty HTTP contents? You can use null. Okay. Let's see if that works. At least it runs. Let's call again. Okay, your suggestion response.status code. Should I be able to return that? Alan Nitro instead of the route that I've taken now. Let's see. Okay, now we have a success. Perfect. And because default 0 for an int, will return 0. Okay, now let's try to mix it up in our flow. So first of all, we should see what has been called here. Yes. Let's return the answer to the universe. And let's call it again. Okay, let's turn this off. All right, excellent. So that works. So now we have our callback setup. That works. We can return a value, which works. Excellent. Next up, let's create a custom connector. All right, so I already had one. Let's create a new one. Let's call this company connects because I will assume that you will be have other stuff as well. There. Let me take boot core. Let's just pink. There we go. HTTPS. Let's use our NGRock for now. Base URLs API. not going to enforce security right now. It's something that we will likely want to do later. Let's create a new trigger. Use in my starting point. So let's create and register this request. Okay, so this is what we need to get from the subscribe here. This is the subscribe. It's doing a post to there, and we're gonna use let's copy it from over here. Oh no, I need to post it to G-Rock, of course. So let me copy the ng-rock URL. EI/user data options. Oh, should be in the body. And then imports. Okay, so now we have the request. Response is generated from your service when an event the webhook is registered for occurs. Do not need to define the response of the request creation. Define the response that is generated from your service when an event the webhook is registered for occurs. So I would expect that could be just an empty in this case, because yeah. Right, callback URLs over there. Set required and internal visibility. Edits. Edits. Required, yes. This is also required. There we go. The webhook creation response required to specify a location header, the value of which will be used to delete the webhook registration. You must define the path of the delete webhook request as an internal action. So, okay, the webhook creation response is required to specify a location header. done that before. Check that out. I have not deleted it. Create webhook. This way we can specify how to delete it actually. Right. So instead, in our subscribe, we should not return okay, so this will specify a location header. Basically what we like to do, so we take the requests URL, we take the path, which basically is /API/user data options, and we want to add the row key, which is the title. So basically we get WAC API, WAC user data options, WAC title for the unsubscribe. And in this particular case, we use the body for the unsubscribe, but we're going to change that to use the ID instead. And the ID, do it like that. And that way we know. So it's a little bit different now for unsubscribing than we used previously. But let's check this out first. Okay, cool. So now if we want to subscribe, we use the same format. That should still work. Bam, there it is. But this time we should have a location. There it is. Header. And we should be able to use this location header to unsubscribe. And we don't need a body anymore. This is probably not going to work. Error. Post. Hey, why is that? That's strange. $200, okay. But did it actually delete it? Yes. So let's register it. Bam, there it is. remove it. Bam, it's gone. Perfect. So now it's using the location header. Get rid of that. All right. So that was that. So now we just need to define the action. So that was the first part that we did. So we are required to specify a location header, value of which will be used to delete the webhook registration. And then you must define the path of the delete webhook request as an internal action. So we need to do that as well. So we create a new action. User data option. Delete a user data option. Maybe we should take a look at the naming convention later. Describe user data option. It must be internal. And the request is actually a delete. Going to the ngrok. /API/user data options / and then ID. We don't need the header. We don't need the body. There we go. Now we have just a plain. All right, let's create it. Let's check it out. So now we can test it out with the title, custom connector source, and the callback URL, whatever, localhost, blah. It's not available yet. Okay, well, let's see if we can use it. So currently we have this over here, but we cannot use this anymore. Let's delete the trigger. And we should be, I think we should refresh it first. Not sure if it will pick up our new trigger. Look for company connect. Boom, there it is. Do not show again. And then user data option trigger. And now it's much more friendly for the user because it just needs to provide a title, custom connector. Custom connector source. All right. So we should be able to see the requests coming through here as soon as I save it. Let's see what it does. Boom, saved. Yeah, so that's not found. That's the previous one. Of course, it cannot find it because we changed it in the meantime. But you can see that we have actually it worked. This is really, really cool. Now when I want to get my user data value again, name was, so we should get rid of that one first, or mess up everything. So in actually it's in my local storage, local storage accounts. Emulator tables, user data options, open, boom. So this one and this one you can delete, go. Also remove the sample one. There it is. And then so let's get data from there. And again, 42. Which is kind of cool. So now it's ran our custom trigger. How awesome is that? Kind of cool if you think about it. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. That works. Now let's see if we can change it to actually do something. Therefore, let's edit this one. Let's add a variable. And let's initialize it. And I'll need to grab a token from my mail. So as I do not want to show that. All right, I'm back. I've copied the token that I need. Initialize AFAS token. So I've created a token through which I can access AFAS. Yeah, I need to test that as well. What was the URL again? To test it out. Again, I'll be back. Just a sec. All right, there we are. So I can go to AFAS Connect. I need to have the member number, which is this. Using token authorization. Of course, it's not the right token. Let me pull it off screen. So that I can copy it. Hang on. Oh, what's it doing? There we are. Cool. So now we're signed in and we have a couple of connectors, for example, the Signal connector and execute this. So, okay. So we execute this, we get the signals per UPN. That's what we want to return. So we want to filter on the UPNs and return a number of how many signals we have available. Let's check out the code samples, because I don't think, is there an alpha? So right. Is there an AFAS connector? No, I don't think so. So we need to do with the regular HTTP connector. So we want to do this. General. First. How do I authenticate? I've seen this before. Where? Port connector, file connector. Let's try if we can. I think it works that way. Let's see. What we should be able to do, so we take the HTTP, the method is get, we want to retrieve data. This is the URL. We need to have an authorization URL, plus token space, and then we do a base 64. Value of token. Cool. Let's see what this does. So we can again get that value. It should still return 42. Hopefully. No. That means that our flow is failing. And it is unauthorized. Okay, so that was not the way token works. It's just some marketing. Plus the token is base 64 string. Authorization. Authorization. It did not base 64. Sometimes I'm having this issue. What I want to do is base 64, not to binary, that value, and I want to grab that value from here, and then now it's a function. This should make a huge difference. Or not. What was it this time? Unauthorized again? Why did not you save it? Or do we need to use a difference? Base 64. The string to encode into base 64 representation returns the base 64 representation of the input string. No. Come on. Base 64. Token. Okay, there it is. Save. Save it again. What if I go back now? Why is it doing this? What's the other function? Base 64 to string. do it like this. Let's write it all the way ourselves. So we're going to do a concat. We want to have this value with a space and then base 64. This value. The variables. Okay. Don't screw this up. All right, still the same. Perfect. Does it work this time? 200. Okay, so there's the 42 again, which means that our flow succeeded. Which means that we got a response back. There it is. Now, is there a way to count the number of rows? That's the actual next step. So, workflow definition language, the function reference. This is my go-to place if I want to look up functions. Work with collections. Length. Return the number of items in a string or array. So I want to have the length of the items in the array. Let's first, I can do it like this. So the structure is, it's an object and it has a rows property, and the rows property is an array. So I'm going to count the rows. What was its connector? Gets signals. Bam. Get signals, and then in the response we want to count the length. Let's do this in the expression. Length, and then the body of the get signals. I can type it in, or I should be able to get it from here. Like that. The length of the body signals, but you want to have it of the rows property. All right. So now we'll return all signals. 85. Cool. So we're already making it more dynamic now. Now the other thing, we want to filter it by UPN. So is there a way we can do this directly equal to blah? Execute. Or do I have signals in here? I don't know. No. Let's okay. So this works. This is the way it executes it. So we can just get this. So we want to filter on UPN. We're going to filter on, in this case, bus. It's a test. But we obviously want to take that in as a parameter so that we can filter on it. Let's see first if this works. 1. There we go. Now let's have our function actually send that in as a parameter. So therefore, we're going to modify the get user data value, some stuff. And instead of just doing the post async with an empty content, object content, it's something that we can use. I don't have an object for this. I can create a model. Let's call this user data value request, for example. It's a public class and give it one property for now, which is a string qbn. User data option, user data value requests. There we go. Or requests, user data value requests, and we want to set the UPN. I'm not seeing this. Guess I need to new it up. And for now, we're gonna still use bus as our guinea pig. New object contents, requests. Object contents, user data requests, requests. Feels a little bit too hard to be true. Just be client post async. How does this work? string content. Obviously, it can take string. Let's take this. Content this, and we'll new data use here. JSON media type formatter sounds about right. Boom. There we go. So now we're sending in some data. It's cool. Let's run this again. Let's make sure that we actually receive the data. So we're not just going to call it again. Then switching over to the flow, looking at the latest. And okay. Perhaps because I need to update my trigger. In the trigger, I need to tell it that my webhook response this time actually has some data. It's structured like UPN. Updating the connector. Calling it again. Let's see what it does this time. There it is. Maybe it needs a little while for it to become available. Eventually. I did the right thing, right? So this is the request that will be used to create and register a webhook. That has not changed. Defines response as generated from your service when an event webhook is registered for occurs. Note you do not need to define the response of a request that creates and registers the webhook. Yeah, so this should be sure what you need to fill in here for description is required. Just don't see it. There it is. Boom. So now I can encode URI component because there's an @ sign inside there. Inject that in between. Very cool. Alright, so let's try to run it again. So it takes a little while for the change to the connector to become available. This time we receive 0. Does not look good. Let's see if we can understand why. Why am I not seeing any? That's weird. Actually posting that contents. Okay, we've reached breakpoints. Request has the UPN. Application JSON. Let's see if we use string content instead. A bit ugly, but let's see. Our content is new string content, and we're gonna just do this manually. So we have UPN, and we set it to that, like this. That was basically the raw JSON that we want to submit. Let's see what this does. Bad gateway. Bad gateway. What's that again? Okay, so this time we do get it. I was just seeing it as string. It's not just a string. Let's tell it explicitly that's application JSON. This time it works. Okay, cool. Perfect. So this worked. So we got back 1 again. That's right. Probably I need to use some other wasn't started yet. Come on. Why so slow? So it succeeded, but did it actually get some data? No. What's up? Hmm. I do not understand. Or is it running? Why not found? Okay. Just trying to post. Okay. Let's try that again. Right. Still? Here it's body says UPN. What's the difference if I use the other one? Because it looks like it's just outputting plain text. The difference is in this. Right. Water. There we go. And there we go. So now it's the same. User data option dot callback URL. There we go. Give me back 1, 0. That's not what I was expecting. Again. Why? What is it? Post async. HTTP client. Post async JSON. Do it. Yes, finally. Okay. All right, so this works. Okay, well, let's end it here. So, yeah, we worked today on, well, first you looked at testing out what we've done last week. being able to register the webhook, call the webhook. Then we've added functionality to get data from the logic app through calling that webhook. And then we've changed our logic app to actually call a backend system, in this case AFAS, to obtain a list of signals. And next we've made it possible to filter signals based on the UPN of a user, and we're feeding in that user from the API. So next up is, I think, deploying this API to Azure, enabling authentication on the function, and then use the currently logged in user that is calling this API to forward its UPN to the logic app so that we can get data of the currently signed in user. So that's going to be the next stream. We'll continue then. It's going to be probably a couple of weeks before we continue due to some other stuff that I have to do in the meantime. So it will we'll pick this up later, somewhere mid-June probably. So keep tuned and check back later. Thanks for checking this out. Signing off.